What would you do if your baby was crying from hunger, your wallet was empty, and you had no one left to call for help? Would you give up, or would you still believe in miracles? Welcome back to Swift Tale, the place where real stories inspire real hearts. If you're watching for the very first time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because today's story will restore your faith in kindness and humanity. Here's a question to think about before we begin. Can a single message, sent by mistake, change two lives forever? This is the story of a struggling single mother, a woman whose strength was tested by every hardship life could throw her way. She lived each day fighting battles no one could see, bills piling up, rent overdue, sleepless nights spent holding her baby close, praying for the next meal. Her entire world revolved around her little one, a tiny baby who didn't know the meaning of hunger but cried endlessly when there was no milk to drink. Every day she pushed herself beyond exhaustion, working odd jobs and skipping meals so her child wouldn't have to. Yet, despite her determination, she found herself at a breaking point, her savings gone, her pantry empty, and her heart heavy with helplessness. That night when her baby's cries echoed through the small, dimly lit apartment, she felt a wave of desperation she had never known before. Her eyes were tired, her hands were trembling, and her heart was racing with worry. In that moment, she decided to reach out for help. She picked up her old phone, scrolled through her contacts, and began typing a message to her close friend, asking for just a little money to buy baby formula. Her message was short, simple, and full of quiet pain. "I'm so sorry to ask again, but I need a little help. The baby's milk is finished, and I don't know what to do." She hit send, hoping for a quick reply, unaware that her tired fingers had made a small mistake, one that would change her life forever. Instead of sending the message to her friend, she accidentally sent it to a stranger, a man whose name she didn't recognize, a number she had never saved, a man who lived in a world completely different from hers, a man who owned skyscrapers, drove luxury cars, and had more money than he could ever spend. A billionaire. When she realized what she had done, panic flooded through her. Her heart pounded as she stared at the screen, whispering, "Oh no, I sent it to the wrong person." She thought about deleting the message, but it was too late. It had already been delivered. She felt ashamed, embarrassed, and afraid. "He'll think I'm a scammer," she thought. "He'll probably block me." She turned off her phone and sat in silence, tears streaming down her face as her baby continued to cry softly in her arms. But little did she know, at that very moment, miles away in a tall glass building overlooking the city, a billionaire named David received a strange message on his personal phone. It wasn't from a business partner or a friend, it was from an unknown number. The message was simple, heartfelt, and desperate. He could have ignored it, deleted it, or assumed it was spam. But something about the tone, the raw honesty of those words, stopped him. It reminded him of something he had long buried, a memory of his own childhood struggles, when his mother had fought the same battles just to keep food on the table. For the first time in a long time, the billionaire felt something stir inside him, empathy. Before we move deeper into this story, let's pause and think about why it matters. In a world where people scroll past others' pain, where kindness often feels like a rare luxury, this story reminds us of something powerful, that compassion still exists, and sometimes it comes from the most unexpected places. We live in times where one text message can carry a world of emotion, a cry for help, or a spark of hope. And in this story, a simple mistake, one wrong number, became the bridge between despair and destiny. This is not just the story of a poor mother and a rich man. It's the story of how two lives from opposite worlds collided in the most unlikely way. It's about faith, humanity, and the invisible thread that connects us all. It's about how one act of kindness can ripple through hearts, changing lives forever. So as we step into this journey together, remember this: you never know whose life you might touch with a small act of kindness. You never know when your compassion could become someone's miracle. Today's story will show you that even in the darkest nights, a single light of goodness can shine bright enough to guide someone home. Once again, you're watching Swift Tale, where real stories remind us that there's still hope in this world. If this opening has already touched your heart, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who believes in miracles, and subscribe for more stories that move your soul. Now, let's begin the journey of how one desperate mother, one wrong text, and one compassionate billionaire came together to prove that kindness truly changes lives. The morning light barely crept through the thin curtains of Sarah's small, one-room apartment. The walls were cracked and stained, whispering silent stories of struggle. The air was still, heavy with the smell of old paint and the faint sound of a baby's soft breathing. Sarah sat quietly on the edge of her bed, holding her child close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest. Her baby, Emma, was only 6 months old, innocent, pure, and completely unaware of how hard her mother was fighting to keep them both alive. Sarah was 26, but her tired eyes carried the weight of someone twice her age. She had once dreamed of finishing college, getting a steady job, and building a life full of love and laughter. But life had different plans. Her husband had walked away when he learned she was pregnant, leaving her with nothing but a few unpaid bills and a heart shattered into pieces. Since then, she had been fighting every single day, fighting to pay rent, fighting to keep the lights on, fighting to stay strong when all she wanted to do was cry. Her mornings began before sunrise. She worked at a small diner downtown, where she served coffee and smiled politely at customers who never knew her story. After her shift, she'd rush home to feed Emma, change her diapers, and rock her to sleep before leaving again for her second job, cleaning offices late into the night. She was exhausted, her body aching, her mind filled with worry. But whenever she looked at her baby's tiny face, she found the strength to keep going. Emma was her reason, her hope, her entire world. The bills, however, never stopped coming. The rent notice on the door was a constant reminder that she was falling behind. The electricity company had already warned her about another late payment, and that week, the last bit of formula was almost gone. She checked her wallet, a few crumpled notes, some coins, not nearly enough to buy a new can. Her heart sank. She didn't want to ask anyone for help. She had already borrowed from neighbors, co-workers, even sold her old jewelry just to make ends meet. But now she was out of options. That night, as Emma began to cry again, Sarah sat on the floor beside her bed, tears streaming down her face. "SHH, Mommy's here," she whispered softly, her voice trembling. She tried to feed her, but the bottle was nearly empty. Her baby's hungry cries grew louder, echoing through the small apartment like a cry for mercy. It broke her heart. She looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "God, please, just a little help. I can't do this anymore." In that moment of desperation, she remembered her friend Lisa, someone she used to work with at the diner who had helped her before. Maybe Lisa could lend her a little money until payday. She picked up her phone, her hands shaking, and began typing the message. Her eyes were blurry from crying, her fingers trembling as she tried to write something that didn't sound too desperate. She hesitated for a moment before pressing send, unaware that her exhaustion had led her to type one wrong digit in Lisa's number. The message, meant for her friend, would soon reach a man whose world was nothing like hers. After sending the text, she placed her phone down beside her and closed her eyes. The room was quiet again except for the soft whimpers of her baby. She thought about her life, how quickly everything had fallen apart. There had been a time when she had believed that love could conquer anything, that good people were rewarded, that hard work paid off. But now, those beliefs seemed like distant memories. All she wanted was enough money to feed her baby. That was her only wish. Hours passed. The night grew darker. Sarah fell asleep sitting up, holding Emma against her chest, whispering small promises of a better tomorrow. She didn't know if help would come, but she had to believe that something, anything, would change. Because if she stopped believing, what else was left? Meanwhile, her phone lay silent on the table, the message quietly resting in someone else's inbox. A stranger's inbox. A man who had no idea who she was, but whose curiosity would soon be stirred by her words. A man who, by sheer accident, was about to step into her life and turn her story upside down. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of birds outside her window. The baby was still asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to breathe. She walked to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and watched the sunrise. The golden light touched her face, warm and gentle, almost like a promise that maybe today something good would happen, but she didn't know that her life was already changing. Somewhere across town, her message had reached a billionaire who was just about to read it. And that, dear viewers, is where the story begins to shift, where fate starts weaving two completely different worlds together. From the small apartment of a single mother to the grand office of a billionaire, destiny was already at work. Across town, in the heart of the city, stood a tall glass tower that kissed the morning sky, the headquarters of Harrison Global Enterprises. Inside, everything was polished to perfection. The marble floors gleamed, the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne, and the constant clicking of shoes echoed through the grand hallways. On the top floor, in a corner office overlooking the city, sat David Harrison, a man who seemed to have everything the world could offer: success, wealth, power, and influence. Yet despite it all, there was something missing. David was a billionaire by name, but a lonely soul at heart. His life revolved around meetings, deals, and numbers flashing across screens. He had built his empire from the ground up, but in the process, he had lost the warmth of human connection. His mornings were quiet, his evenings even quieter. The only sounds that filled his home were the ticking of clocks and the echo of his own footsteps. That morning, as he sat at his desk reviewing reports, his phone buzzed, an unusual occurrence on his personal number. Hardly anyone outside his inner circle had that number. He frowned slightly, expecting it to be one of his business partners or perhaps his assistant. But when he opened the message, his expression changed completely. The message was simple, emotional, and unexpected. "I'm so sorry to ask again, but I need a little help. The baby's milk is finished, and I don't know what to do." David stared at the words for a long moment. It wasn't a scam, it didn't have the hallmarks of one. It wasn't an advertisement or an error from his bank. It was just human, raw, honest, and desperate. He read it again, and for the first time in years, something stirred deep within him, a memory. He remembered his mother, working late nights in a small diner, her hands always tired, her smile forced but loving. He remembered the nights when the fridge was nearly empty, and how she would pretend she wasn't hungry so he could eat. He remembered the sound of her quiet crying when she thought he was asleep. That message, from a stranger, carried echoes of his past, of a struggle he had long escaped, but never truly forgotten. "Who is this?" he murmured to himself, scrolling up to see if there were any previous texts. There were none, just this single message. For a moment, his logical mind took over. "It's probably a wrong number," he said under his breath. Maybe she meant to text someone else. But another part of him, the part that still remembered hunger and fear, couldn't let it go. He called his assistant, Rachel. "Rachel," he said in a calm but curious tone, "I just received a strange message on my personal phone." "Strange, sir," she replied. "Yes," he continued, reading it aloud. "It sounds like someone's in trouble." Rachel hesitated. "Do you think it's legitimate, or could it be a scam?" "I'm not sure," he said, leaning back in his chair, "but something tells me it's real." After a moment of silence, he made a decision that surprised even himself. "Find out who this number belongs to," he instructed. Rachel quickly began the trace. Within a few hours, she returned with the results. "It's registered to a woman named Sarah Miller," she said softly. "She lives in a small apartment on the east side of the city." David nodded slowly. "Thank you, Rachel. That's all I needed." Later that night, as David sat alone in his penthouse, he couldn't stop thinking about the message. The city lights twinkled below, but he felt a deep emptiness that not even his wealth could fill. He opened his phone again and read the message for what felt like the 100th time. The desperation in her words tugged at his conscience. He typed a reply, then hesitated, unsure if he should send it. Finally, he took a deep breath and pressed send. "Hello, I believe you may have sent this message to the wrong person, but if you truly need help, please don't be afraid to ask. Tell me what you need." Across the city, Sarah's phone buzzed. She had just finished putting her baby to sleep and was folding laundry when she saw the message. At first, she frowned. She didn't recognize the number. Then she read it, and her heart froze. "Oh no," she whispered. "I really did send it to the wrong person." Embarrassment flooded her. Her cheeks burned with shame. "He must think I'm a scammer or a beggar," she thought. She quickly began typing a reply. "I'm so sorry, sir. That message wasn't meant for you. Please ignore it." She hit send and sighed deeply, thinking that was the end of it. She put her phone down and tried to distract herself, but the guilt stayed heavy in her chest. Meanwhile, David received her apology. He smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but out of admiration. There was humility in her words and honesty. He could tell she wasn't lying. After a long pause, he typed again. No need to apologize. If you truly need help, I'd like to offer it, no strings attached. When Sarah saw that message, she froze. Her mind raced. Why would a stranger say that? Who is this man? What if it's a trick? But another voice inside her whispered something different. What if it's real? What if this is the help you prayed for? She sat there, staring at her screen, torn between fear and hope. Finally, she replied, "Thank you, but I can't accept help from someone I don't know. I'm sorry for bothering you." And that's when David knew she wasn't like anyone else. She wasn't someone looking to take advantage. She was proud, even in her pain. Respect grew inside him. He didn't reply right away. He didn't want to scare her off. But he made up his mind. He would help her, whether she accepted it or not. That night he called Rachel again. "Send an anonymous delivery to this address," he said, forwarding Sarah's location. Formula, groceries, diapers, everything a single mother might need. Rachel hesitated for a moment. Should I leave a note? David thought for a second, then said softly, "No, let her believe it's a blessing. She doesn't need to know where it came from, not yet." And just like that, the first thread between two strangers was woven, one of need, compassion, and fate. The next morning, when Sarah opened her door, she gasped. A box sat neatly on her doorstep, filled with baby formula, diapers, food, and even a small note that said only one line. "You are not alone." Tears filled her eyes. She looked around, hoping to see who left it, but no one was there. She picked up the box, held it close, and whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are." What she didn't know was that miles away, a billionaire sat by his window, smiling quietly for the first time in years, because he knew that sometimes even the smallest act of kindness can change the world. The following morning, the sun rose over the skyline, painting the glass towers of the city in shades of gold. Inside one of those towers sat a man whose life most people could only dream of: David Harrison. To the world, he was a symbol of success, a billionaire investor, a philanthropist, a visionary who had built an empire from nothing. People admired him, envied him, and feared him all at once. But beneath the expensive suit and flawless reputation was a man who lived behind invisible walls, walls built not of stone, but of loneliness. David's days were predictable. Every morning, his assistant, Rachel, arrived with a schedule packed to the minute: board meetings, investor calls, press interviews, charity galas. His company, Harrison Global Enterprises, spanned multiple continents, with interests in technology, real estate, and finance. Everything about his life screamed perfection. His penthouse overlooked the entire city, his cars sat gleaming in private garages, and his name carried power wherever it was spoken. And yet, behind all that, his heart felt strangely empty. That morning, while sipping his usual black coffee, David found himself distracted. He wasn't thinking about profits or new ventures. His mind kept drifting back to that single text message. The desperation in the woman's words had pierced something deep within him. He couldn't shake it off. Her simple plea for help had echoed louder than any corporate deal he'd ever made. He looked out the window at the city below, people rushing, traffic blaring, everyone chasing something. "So many people out there," he murmured, "and yet we hardly ever stop to notice anyone's pain." His reflection stared back at him in the glass, successful, yes, but detached. He thought about how long it had been since he'd done something genuinely human, something that wasn't tied to a business strategy or a headline about generosity. Later that day, he attended a high-profile charity luncheon filled with wealthy donors, journalists, and politicians. The hall sparkled with chandeliers, laughter, and polite conversation. As the host took the stage to thank the distinguished guests for their contributions to ending poverty, David couldn't help but feel a pang of irony. Here they were, sipping champagne worth more than some people earned in a month, talking about helping the poor. It felt hollow, all for show. He glanced around the room and realized something profound. He was surrounded by people, but completely alone. None of them knew who he truly was. None of them cared about the man behind the money. And in that moment, he thought of Sarah again, the stranger who had unknowingly texted him, who didn't know his name, his face, or his fortune, but whose words had reminded him of something real. That evening, when the event was over and the city lights flickered like stars below, David returned to his penthouse. The silence greeted him like an old friend. He walked through the enormous space, modern art on the walls, crystal fixtures, sleek furniture, everything perfectly in place, yet lifeless. He paused by the grand piano in the corner. It had belonged to his mother. She used to play it every night after work, her soft tunes filling their tiny apartment when he was a child. He hadn't touched it in years. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he ran his fingers across the keys. A faint melody filled the room, fragile but beautiful. As he played, memories came rushing back, his mother's tired smile, her calloused hands, her whispered prayers for better days. He could still hear her saying, "David, no matter how rich you become, never forget what it feels like to be hungry." Those words had guided him once, but somewhere along the road to success, he had lost them, until now. When he stopped playing, he sat quietly in the stillness. He realized that the woman, Sarah, had reminded him of his mother. The same strength, the same desperation to protect a child, the same silent endurance. And he felt something shift inside him. For the first time in a long time, he didn't just want to write a check for charity, he wanted to change a life. He picked up his phone and called Rachel again. "Rachel," he said softly, "I want you to find out everything you can about Sarah Miller. Discreetly, I don't want her to know." "Of course, sir," she replied. "May I ask why?" He hesitated, then said, "Because sometimes people need help, not pity. I want to understand her world before I decide how to help." Over the next few days, reports came in. Rachel had learned that Sarah lived in a small apartment in the poorer side of the city. She worked 2 jobs, one as a waitress, another cleaning offices at night. She had no family nearby, no financial support, and was raising a baby alone. Her record showed no debt, no criminal history, just a woman trying her best to survive. David listened silently as Rachel briefed him. Each detail made his heart heavier. When she finished, he simply said, "Thank you, that'll be all." After she left, he sat in his chair for a long time, staring out the window at the city below. "How many others are living like her right now?" he whispered. He began to think deeply about the difference between giving and understanding. He had donated millions to causes over the years, but this was different. This was personal. For the first time, he wanted to see the person he was helping, not just their name on a donation form. That night, David decided he wanted to meet her, not as a billionaire, not as a savior, but as a man who wanted to understand her story. But he knew he couldn't just walk up to her door and say, "Hi, I'm the man who sent you the formula." That would scare her, so he came up with an idea. Through one of his charities, he organized a small local outreach event in Sarah's neighborhood, a food drive and free medical camp for struggling families. It wasn't advertised as one of his company's events. Instead, it was humble, quiet, and genuine. David planned to attend not in a suit, not with cameras, but in plain clothes, as just another volunteer. On the day of the event, Sarah arrived with Emma in her arms. She looked tired but grateful. The volunteers handed her food, baby supplies, and small necessities. David, standing nearby, recognized her instantly. She looked exactly as he had imagined, humble, strong, and exhausted, but with eyes that carried endless love for her child. For a moment, he simply watched her, the way she smiled when someone gave Emma a toy, the way she said, "Thank you," even when accepting something small. It touched him deeply. This wasn't just another charity case. This was a story of survival, of courage, of quiet dignity. As she turned to leave, their eyes met for the first time. It was only for a few seconds, but something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of recognition, though she had no idea who he really was. She smiled politely, and he smiled back. It was a simple moment, but it stayed with him long after she was gone. That night, as David stood by his window once again, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is why that message came to me. Maybe it wasn't a mistake after all." That night, after returning home from the charity event, Sarah placed little Emma gently into her crib. The baby's soft breathing filled the quiet apartment, her tiny hand clutching the corner of a worn-out blanket. The day had been long, but for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a small sense of relief. The unexpected food drive in her neighborhood had been a blessing. She'd received enough formula and groceries to last at least a few days. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Sarah picked up her old phone, its screen cracked at the corner. She scrolled absent-mindedly through her messages, mostly job alerts, unpaid bills, and spam. But then her eyes fell upon the thread, the one she had sent days ago, the text that was never meant to reach the person it did. The message she'd sent in desperation: "Please, I just need a little money to buy baby formula. I'll pay it back as soon as I can." She sighed softly, shaking her head. "I don't even know why I texted that number," she whispered to herself. "Probably just a mistake." But then she noticed something. There was a new message, one she hadn't seen before. Her heart skipped a beat. The message read: "Hi, this is David. I received your text by mistake a few days ago. I'm sorry it took me so long to reply. I wanted to make sure you and your baby are okay." Sarah stared at the message, her heart racing. She didn't know how to feel. Who was this David? Why was he responding now after days of silence? For a moment, she considered ignoring it. She'd had enough disappointments in life to know that good things rarely came uninvited. But something about the tone of the message felt different. It wasn't condescending. It wasn't distant. It felt human. After several minutes of hesitation, she typed back: "Hi David, yes, we're okay. Thank you for asking. I didn't mean to bother you with that message. It was sent to the wrong number." She hit send, half expecting no reply. But just a few moments later, her phone buzzed again. "No bother at all. Mistakes happen. But I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. Are you managing now? Do you have what you need for your baby?" Her throat tightened. Nobody ever asked her that. Not her landlord, not her co-workers, not even her family, who had drifted away after she chose to raise Emma alone. She hesitated, unsure whether to open up. Then, with trembling fingers, she wrote back: "Things are hard, but we're getting by. I'm doing my best." David read her message on the other side of the city. Sitting by the window of his penthouse, the glow from the city lights reflected in his eyes. He could almost hear her voice in those simple words, tired, humble, but strong. Something inside him told him this wasn't just about giving money, it was about listening. He typed again, choosing his words carefully. "You sound like a very strong person, Sarah. I know we don't know each other, but would it be okay if I helped you? No strings attached." When Sarah read that, tears filled her eyes, not because of the offer itself, but because of the sincerity she felt behind it. For years, she had been judged, pitied, or ignored, but never seen. And now, a stranger, someone she hadn't even meant to contact, was offering to help. But she couldn't bring herself to accept. Pride, fear, and caution all tangled within her heart. "I appreciate that," she replied, "but I can't accept help from someone I don't know. You've already been kind enough to ask." David stared at her reply for a long moment, his respect for her growing even stronger. He wasn't surprised, he admired her courage. "That's exactly why I want to help," he thought to himself. He typed one last message for the night. "I understand completely. Please don't feel pressured. Just promise me one thing: if you ever truly need help, text me. Anytime, day or night." Sarah didn't know how to respond. She read the message several times, then set her phone aside. For some reason, it brought her comfort. A stranger's words had given her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. Days turned into weeks. Sarah's routine continued: work, bills, caring for Emma, but every so often her mind drifted back to David. She wondered who he was. His messages had been polite, thoughtful, and genuine, but vague. She imagined him as maybe a middle-aged man, kind-hearted but lonely, perhaps someone who had lost his own family. She didn't know the truth that the man texting her was one of the wealthiest people in the country. Meanwhile, David found himself checking his phone more often than usual. In the midst of meetings, he'd catch himself glancing at his messages, hoping to hear from her. It wasn't attraction, it was admiration. She reminded him of something he'd long forgotten: resilience, honesty, humanity. One evening, while driving home, David's car passed through Sarah's part of town. The contrast between her world and his was staggering: cracked sidewalks, flickering streetlights, small stores struggling to stay open. He saw mothers walking with their children, fathers returning from long shifts, kids playing barefoot in the dust. It hit him, This was the world most people lived in, far from the gleaming towers he called home. That night, he texted her again. "Hey Sarah, I was thinking, you mentioned working 2 jobs. Are you getting enough rest? That sounds exhausting." She smiled faintly at her screen. Nobody ever asked about her well-being, only what she could do. She replied, "It is exhausting, but I don't have a choice. My baby depends on me. Maybe one day things will get easier." He responded, "They will, I believe that. You're doing something incredible, Sarah. You're not just surviving, you're building a future for your child. That strength most people will never understand." Sarah felt her heart soften. There was something about his words, gentle, kind, and unfiltered. They didn't come from someone pretending to care. They came from someone who meant it. As the days passed, their messages became more frequent. They spoke about life. Struggles, little moments of joy. She told him about Emma's first steps, about how she sang to her baby at night, about her dream to one day open a small bakery. David, in turn, shared small, human glimpses of his life, stories from his childhood, his mother's music, his belief that kindness could still change the world. What started as a mistake had turned into something meaningful, a connection that neither of them had expected, but both deeply needed. One night, as David read Sarah's message, "Thank you, David. You've reminded me that there are still good people out there." He felt something shift inside him once again. This wasn't just about helping anymore. This was about healing for both of them. He looked out at the city lights and whispered, "Sarah, you have no idea who I really am, but maybe one day you will. And when you do, I hope you'll still see me as the man behind the messages, not the billionaire behind the name." It had been almost 2 months since that accidental text, 2 months of quiet messages, late-night talks, and an invisible bond that grew stronger with every passing day. Sarah still didn't know who David really was, but in her heart, she felt a strange connection, as if he was someone sent by fate to remind her that kindness still existed. Life, however, had a way of testing even the most fragile moments of peace. One morning, as Sarah hurried to get ready for work, she noticed the final notice from her landlord pinned to her door, "Payment overdue, final warning." Her heart sank. She had already been working double shifts, skipping meals, and selling small belongings to make ends meet. But this time, there was simply nothing left to give. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the piece of paper. Emma was playing nearby, babbling softly with her toy bear. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered to her baby. "Mommy will figure something out. She always does." That evening, as she sat exhausted in her small apartment, her phone buzzed. "David, hey Sarah, how was your day?" She hesitated before replying. She didn't want to burden him, but something in her broke. "Honestly, not great. I might lose my apartment soon. I've tried everything, but it's just not enough." On the other end of the city, David paused mid-reading. The calm, measured man who spent years controlling every emotion suddenly felt a rush of protectiveness. He couldn't let this happen, not after everything he'd seen and heard from her. "David, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Please, let me help, just this once. No questions, no judgment." "Sarah, David, I can't. You've already done so much by just listening. I can't take money from you." He smiled faintly. She was too proud, too pure for pity, and that was exactly why she deserved help the most. "David, then don't think of it as money. Think of it as a friend lending a hand. You can pay it forward someday, in your own way." There was a long pause. Then finally, a simple reply came. "Sarah, okay, just this once." Within an hour, David had arranged everything through one of his discreet foundations. The next morning, Sarah received a call from her landlord. Her rent had been paid in full, with an extra month's security deposit. The man on the phone said it came from an anonymous donor. Sarah was stunned. She sat in silence for a long while, tears streaming down her face. She texted David immediately. "I don't know what to say. You didn't have to do that." "David, I wanted to. I told you, sometimes good things come from mistakes." But even as she thanked him, a question grew in her mind. Who was this man? Nobody just helped like that, not without expecting something in return. Still, everything about him had been sincere, for now she chose to trust her instincts. The next weekend, David decided to see her again, not from afar this time, but face to face. His heart told him it was time, but he didn't want to scare her with his wealth or power. He wanted her to see him as the same man she'd been texting, someone real, someone human. So he came up with a plan. Through his foundation, he organized a small job fair and community lunch at the same neighborhood center where he had first seen her. He dressed plainly, jeans, a simple shirt, no watch, no suit. He wanted to blend in. To everyone there, he was just David, a volunteer helping people find work. When Sarah arrived, she looked radiant despite the struggles. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair tied back, holding Emma on her hip. Her eyes lit up when she saw the community bustling with warmth and generosity. Tables of food, volunteers helping people fill out job forms, children playing nearby. It was everything she wished the world could be. David saw her from across the hall. For a brief second, he forgot the crowd, the noise, everything. It was like time slowed. There she was, the woman whose words had reached beyond wealth, beyond loneliness, straight into his heart. He took a breath and approached her. "Hi there," he said gently, smiling. "I'm David. I'm one of the volunteers here. Would you like a hand finding the registration desk?" Sarah smiled back, unaware of who he truly was. "That would be great, thank you," she said warmly. "I'm Sarah." "Nice to meet you, Sarah," he replied, his voice calm but sincere. "And this little one must be Emma." Sarah laughed softly. "Yes, she's the boss of the house." For the next hour, they spoke casually about jobs, about the community, about life. David listened intently, every word she spoke revealing more of her spirit. She was funny, honest, humble, everything money could never buy. But just as things felt almost normal, an unexpected moment nearly shattered the illusion. A well-dressed man entered the hall and rushed up to David, whispering urgently, "Sir, the investor's call has been moved to 3 p.m. Should I have the team prepare your office?" Sarah blinked, confused. "Sir," she repeated, looking at David. The tone of respect in the man's voice was impossible to miss. David's expression froze for a second. He turned to his assistant and said quietly, "Not now, Mark, please." The man nodded awkwardly and stepped away. Sarah looked at David curiously. "Wait, who exactly are you?" David sighed softly, knowing the truth could no longer stay hidden. He looked into her eyes, not as a billionaire defending his secrets, but as a man revealing his heart. "I was going to tell you," he said gently. "I just didn't want this to change how you see me. The truth is, I run a few businesses. The foundation you're standing in today, it's mine." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "You mean you're that David Harrison, the billionaire?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but please, don't think of me as that person. The man you've been talking to, that's me too. The same David who listened when you were struggling. The same man who admired your strength." She didn't know what to say. Her mind swirled with confusion, gratitude, and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," he said softly, "I didn't want you to feel small. I wanted you to see that people with everything can still care. That sometimes it takes losing touch with reality to understand what really matters." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "You didn't owe me anything, David, and yet you gave me everything I needed, hope." He smiled, his own eyes glistening. "And you gave me something I hadn't felt in years, purpose." Emma babbled, reaching out her little hand toward David. He gently took it, smiling. The moment was pure, silent, and full of something words could never describe. In that small community hall, two worlds, one of struggle, one of success, collided. Not in chaos, but in understanding. For a few precious weeks, life felt different. Sarah and David had begun to see each other more often, not as a billionaire and a struggling mother, but as two people bound by something deeper than circumstance. They shared quiet conversations over coffee, long walks through the park with little Emma, and laughter that neither of them had felt in years. But peace has a way of drawing attention, especially when the world loves to gossip. It started small, a photograph. One afternoon, a journalist caught a glimpse of David in the poorer part of town, handing out supplies with a young woman and a baby. The picture went viral within hours. Headlines exploded across social media. Billionaire David Harrison spotted with mystery woman and child, secret family. Who is the single mother capturing the heart of America's richest philanthropist? Within a day, news vans lined the streets near Sarah's apartment. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Her peaceful, private life had turned into chaos overnight. Sarah stood frozen at her window, holding Emma tightly as strangers shouted her name from below. "Sarah, is it true you're dating him? Did you trick him? Are you after his money?" Her heart raced. She had never felt more terrified or more humiliated. When she called David, her voice trembled. "They're outside my home, David. How did this happen? I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," he said, his tone filled with guilt. "I never wanted you to be exposed like this. I'll handle it, I promise." But damage once done is hard to undo. The media didn't care about truth. They wanted a story, and Sarah, the struggling single mom who had captured a billionaire's heart, was the perfect headline. By the next morning, her job was gone. Her manager had called, saying the company didn't want unnecessary attention. The landlord, too, asked her to move out, claiming security concerns. Everywhere she turned, doors were closing. Sarah sat in her nearly empty apartment, tears falling silently as Emma slept beside her. "Why does kindness always come with a price?" she whispered. That evening, David arrived. For once, he wasn't calm or composed. He looked shaken, angry not at her, but at the world. "Sarah, pack your things. You can't stay here. It's not safe." "I can't just leave everything behind," she said weakly. "I don't belong in your world, David. Look what's happening because of me." He knelt beside her, taking her hands gently. "You belong wherever kindness lives, Sarah, and that's all I've ever wanted, for you and Emma to be safe." She looked into his eyes, those eyes that once seemed unreachable, now filled with raw sincerity. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked. "Why me?" He hesitated, then spoke softly. "Because when you texted me that night, you reminded me of the world I'd forgotten, the world of struggle, love, and humanity. You made me feel again." Despite her fears, she agreed to stay temporarily in one of his guest houses, not a mansion, but a quiet countryside home surrounded by trees and silence. It was safe, peaceful, and far from the noise of cameras. For the first few days, things seemed to calm down. Sarah and Emma adjusted slowly. David visited often, sometimes bringing dinner, sometimes just sitting with them and talking about life. He didn't bring gifts or luxury, just presence, the one thing money could never buy. But outside that peaceful home, the storm only grew louder. The media began digging into Sarah's past, her struggles, her debts, even the hospital records of Emma's birth. Twisted headlines emerged. "Single mom manipulates billionaire with fake story." "David Harrison's reputation at risk, charity or scandal." Business associates warned David that his image was taking a hit. Investors grew nervous. Board members questioned his decisions. "You're risking everything for a woman you barely know," one of them said. David's response was simple. "She's not the one risking anything, I am, and I'm okay with that." But Sarah wasn't. One evening, she found him packing in the garden, frustration clear on his face after another heated call with his PR team. "David," she said quietly, "I can't let you lose everything because of me." He turned sharply. "Sarah, you don't understand." "No," she interrupted, tears brimming. "I do. You've done more for me than anyone ever has. But this storm, this attention, it's destroying the peace we both found. Maybe it's time I step away." His voice softened instantly. "Please don't say that. You and Emma, you're not my burden, you're my reason." She looked away, her voice trembling. "You live in a world where people will never understand someone like me, and I can't live in one where I'm constantly judged for being helped." There was a long silence, only the wind rustling through the trees, the faint sound of Emma laughing in the distance. Finally, Sarah whispered, "Sometimes love means walking away before it breaks something beautiful." And before David could respond, she turned and walked back inside. That night, she packed her few belongings and left quietly, leaving behind a letter on the table. David, thank you for everything, for your kindness, your patience, your heart. You showed me that good people still exist, but I need to stand on my own now to prove to myself that I can. Please don't look for me. If our paths are meant to cross again, they will in peace, not pain. When David found the letter the next morning, he stood still for a long time. He wanted to chase after her, to fix it all, to make the world understand. But deep down, he knew she was right. Some battles had to be fought alone, not to prove love wrong, but to make it stronger. He folded the letter gently and whispered, "I'll wait, Sarah. No matter how long it takes." Soft piano music begins to play, slowly building emotion as the narrator's voice fades in. Narrator voice. Sometimes the storm isn't meant to destroy, it's meant to cleanse, to test the roots of something real. And though their worlds were torn apart by misunderstanding, destiny wasn't finished with them yet. The light was still waiting beyond the rain. The morning sun rose softly over the small town as Sarah stepped off the bus, holding little Emma's hand tightly. Her eyes were tired, her clothes simple, and her heart uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, she felt something new stirring inside her: determination. She had left behind comfort, safety, and the gentle kindness of David, but what she carried with her was far greater: the will to start again on her own terms. The town was quiet, nestled between golden hills and an open sky. Sarah found a small room above a bakery, its rent barely affordable, but its smell of fresh bread every morning brought her a sense of peace. She began working there, cleaning tables, serving coffee, and baking bread before sunrise. The first few weeks were hard. Her hands burned from the oven trays, her back ached from long hours, and some customers whispered when they recognized her face from the tabloids. Yet every night, when Emma curled up beside her and said, "Mama, I love our new home," the pain melted away. One day, the bakery owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Langford, watched Sarah carefully as she decorated cupcakes for a birthday order. "You've got gentle hands, dear," she said with a smile. "Hands that build, not break." Sarah looked up, surprised. "I've made a lot of mistakes," she admitted quietly. Mrs. Langford shook her head. "Mistakes are proof you tried. Don't let the world define you by one chapter when your story isn't over yet." Those words stayed with her. Each morning after that, Sarah woke up earlier, worked harder, and dreamed bigger. She started experimenting with new recipes: cinnamon loaves, berry muffins, chocolate tarts, and customers began to notice. Soon, the bakery's morning crowd grew, and Mrs. Langford gave her more responsibility. "People don't just come for the bread anymore," Mrs. Langford said one day. "They come for you." Meanwhile, miles away, David sat in his high-rise office, staring at the city's skyline. It had been months since Sarah left, but her absence had reshaped him. The noise of wealth and meetings no longer satisfied him. The mansion felt emptier than ever. He often read the letter she left behind, folded neatly in his wallet. Her words, "If our paths are meant to cross again, they will, in peace, not pain," became his guiding light. Instead of chasing after her, he began something new, a foundation to support single parents, named the Emma Project. He poured his heart and resources into it, visiting shelters, schools, and communities himself. And slowly, his image in the media began to change again. People saw the sincerity in his actions. He wasn't a billionaire trying to fix his reputation. He was a man rediscovering his humanity. One morning, months later, fate decided to move its unseen hand once again. A new supplier arrived at the bakery, a foundation that provided fair trade ingredients for small businesses. When Sarah saw the logo stamped on the delivery box, her breath caught: the Emma Project. Her hands trembled as she signed the receipt. The young delivery driver smiled and said, "Yeah, it's that new foundation by Mr. David Harrison. He named it after a little girl, I think." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She held the pen tightly, trying to steady her emotions. "A little girl," she whispered. "Yeah," the man said cheerfully. He said she reminded him what really matters in life. That night, as Emma slept, Sarah sat by the window of her small room. She stared at the stars and let tears roll silently down her cheeks. He hadn't forgotten. He hadn't replaced her story with pity. He had honored it. She whispered softly, "You kept your promise, David, in your own way." Days turned into weeks. The bakery thrived. Sarah's new recipes became so popular that Mrs. Langford decided to open a second branch and insisted that Sarah lead it. "You've earned this, dear," she said proudly. "You turned pain into purpose." When the new branch opened, local media came to cover the story of the single mother who rebuilt her life from scratch. Sarah gave a short, humble interview, never mentioning David, only saying, "Sometimes help comes in ways we don't understand at first, but it teaches us who we are meant to be." The clip spread quietly online, and one evening, while David was reviewing proposals for his foundation, his assistant knocked and said, "Sir, you should see this." On the screen was Sarah, older, calmer, radiant, speaking about resilience, hope, and second chances. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. He leaned back, smiling faintly as his eyes softened. "She did it," he murmured. "She really did it." He didn't call her, he didn't send flowers. He simply sat there, feeling proud, not of what he had given her, but of what she had found in herself. Yet deep down, both of them felt it, that invisible thread still connecting their hearts across distance and silence. Soft instrumental music begins to rise as the narrator speaks. Narrator voice. Sometimes the hardest goodbyes are the ones that lead us home, not to a place, but to ourselves. Sarah thought she had lost everything, but in truth, she found what she was missing all along: her strength, her purpose, her voice. And while David watched from afar, he realized something too, that love doesn't fade when distance grows. It matures, it waits. Had been 2 years since the day Sarah had left David's mansion behind. 2 years since she had rebuilt her world, step by step, with quiet courage and unwavering love for her daughter, Emma. The bakery was thriving now, both branches bustling with customers every morning, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee filling the streets. Sarah had become somewhat of a local symbol of resilience. People admired her not just for her success, but for her humility, the way she still greeted everyone with the same soft smile that had carried her through her darkest days. But life, as always, had one more twist to unfold. It was a warm spring afternoon when she received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Invitation to the Emma Project Annual Gala." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She read the sender's name twice, the Emma Project Foundation headquarters. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through the message. "Dear Ms. Sarah Collins, we are honored to invite you as a special guest to the annual fundraising gala of the Emma Project Foundation, recognizing individuals who have inspired change through resilience and compassion. Your story has touched countless hearts and represents the very spirit of what this foundation stands for." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. She had never sought recognition. She had simply wanted to survive, to make a better life for Emma. But seeing her name on that invitation felt like the universe was whispering, "You've come full circle." The night of the gala arrived like a dream. Sarah wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress that Mrs. Langford had insisted on buying her. Emma, now a bright and curious 3-year-old, stayed with a neighbor for the evening, waving goodbye and saying, "Mama, be brave." Her words echoed in Sarah's heart as she took a deep breath and stepped into the shimmering ballroom. The hall was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers reflected soft light across polished marble floors, and the room was filled with laughter, music, and grace. But what caught her attention most was the large banner that hung above the stage. "The Emma Project Hope begins with one small act." Her throat tightened. She walked among the guests quietly, unsure if David would even be there. Part of her wondered if he'd remember her at all, yet deep inside, she knew he would. Then, amid the clinking of glasses and the murmur of voices, a hush spread across the crowd. The lights dimmed, and the host stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began, "tonight we celebrate stories of courage, kindness, and the power of a single message to change a life. And no story embodies that more beautifully than the one that inspired the Emma Project itself." The host paused, smiling toward the side of the stage. "Please welcome our founder, Mr. David Harrison." A gentle wave of applause filled the room. Sarah's breath caught as she saw him, David, walking onto the stage, poised yet humble, his presence commanding but softer than before. Time had changed him. The arrogance once seen in headlines had vanished. He looked older, wiser, grounded. He stepped up to the microphone, his eyes sweeping the audience before landing, almost instinctively, on her. The world around them seemed to fade. "2 years ago," David began, his voice calm and sincere, "I received a text message from a woman I didn't know, a message that wasn't meant for me at all. She was a single mother, desperate to feed her baby. That message changed my life." The audience listened in silence. Sarah's hands clutched her purse tightly as tears threatened to fall. "I thought I was helping her," David continued, "but the truth is she helped me. She reminded me of what it means to care, to feel, to see beyond wealth and status. That one message opened my heart and led to the creation of this foundation, named in honor of her daughter, Emma." The crowd erupted into warm applause, unaware that the woman he spoke of was standing quietly among them. David smiled faintly, lowering his gaze for a moment. "Tonight," he added, "we celebrate the power of compassion, because sometimes a mistake isn't really a mistake, it's destiny in disguise." As the applause filled the room again, David stepped down from the stage, surrounded by board members and reporters. Sarah stood frozen, unsure if she should approach him. Her heart pounded like it had all those years ago when she'd sent that fateful text. Then, as if drawn by something beyond logic, David turned. Their eyes met across the crowd. The noise faded. Time seemed to stop. He froze, disbelief flashing across his face before melting into the softest, most genuine smile she had ever seen. Slowly, he walked toward her, each step measured and full of emotion. When he finally reached her, there were no words for a moment, only silence and the gentle hum of music in the background. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly, "you came." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I had to," she replied softly. "You named it after her, after Emma." David's eyes filled with tears. "She was the reason you reached out, and the reason I found my purpose." He paused, looking at her as if afraid she'd vanish. "You did more than survive, Sarah, you thrived." A small, emotional laugh escaped her lips. "So did you." For a moment, they just stood there, two souls bound by fate, no longer strangers separated by circumstance, but equals who had changed each other's lives forever. David gestured gently toward the stage. "Would you join me for a moment?" Before she could answer, the host noticed them and smiled knowingly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, "tonight's true inspiration is right here among us, the woman whose message started it all, Ms. Sarah Collins." The crowd turned, applauding as David led her to the stage. Cameras flashed, people whispered, and Sarah stood there in disbelief. She didn't feel embarrassed or overwhelmed, she felt proud. For the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the applause faded, David leaned close and whispered, "No matter where life takes us next, I'll always be grateful for that one message." Sarah smiled, her voice trembling as she replied, "And I'll always be grateful you answered." The crowd cheered as they shook hands, not as billionaire and single mom, not as charity founder and beneficiary, but as two people whose lives had been forever changed by an act of kindness born from a mistake. And as the lights glittered above them, Sarah glanced upward, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks, not for wealth, not for fame, but for the strength it took to reach this moment. Soft emotional piano fades in as the narrator speaks. Narrator voice. Sometimes the universe doesn't make mistakes, it just redirects our messages to the people who need them most. Sarah's story began with desperation, but it ended with hope, compassion, and a reminder that a single act of kindness can change more than one life. It can change the world. The gala lights slowly dimmed, and the crowd began to disperse, yet the warmth in the air lingered like the final note of a song that refuses to fade. Sarah stood quietly near the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the glass. David had been pulled away by reporters, foundation members, and old friends, yet before leaving he had turned one last time and mouthed the words, "Thank you." It wasn't just gratitude for that single text years ago, it was a silent acknowledgement of everything that followed: the growth, the pain, the transformation. Outside, a soft drizzle had begun to fall. Sarah stepped out into the cool night, the raindrops touching her face gently, like blessings from the sky. She looked up, closed her eyes, and smiled, not because life had suddenly become perfect, but because she had finally found peace within imperfection. She had learned that strength isn't born in comfort. It's forged in moments of despair, in nights spent crying quietly, and in mornings when you rise despite wanting to give up. When she returned home, Emma was already asleep, her little arms wrapped around a stuffed bear David had sent months ago. Sarah knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "We did it, baby," she whispered softly. "We made it." In that still moment, she realized something profound. The message she had sent years ago wasn't just a plea for help. It was the beginning of a chain reaction that changed countless lives. One mistaken text had turned into a movement of compassion, kindness, and second chances, and all of it began with a single mother's courage to ask for help. Over the next few months, Sarah continued her work at the bakery, but now she did something more. Every week, she visited shelters and struggling mothers, bringing food, comfort, and hope. When people asked her why, she always said the same thing: "Because someone once answered my message when they didn't have to." Her story continued to inspire millions online. People who once felt invisible found strength in her journey. The world didn't just see her as the woman who texted a billionaire by mistake. They saw her as the woman who proved that miracles often come disguised as accidents. As time passed, David and Sarah stayed in touch, not as lovers bound by romance, but as two souls forever connected by destiny and purpose. Every few months, they would meet for coffee, talk about Emma, and share updates about their lives. There was no bitterness, no regret, only mutual respect and quiet gratitude for the role they had played in each other's stories. One day, while sitting by the window of her bakery, Sarah saw a young mother outside, crying softly while holding her baby. Without a second thought, she stepped out, handed the woman a loaf of warm bread, and placed a few bills in her hand. "You'll get through this," she said gently. "I know you will." The woman looked at her in disbelief, asking, "Why are you helping me?" Sarah smiled, "Because once someone helped me too, and it changed everything." As she walked back inside, a customer noticed the small sign above her bakery's counter, a framed message written in delicate handwriting. "Sometimes a wrong number is the universe dialing the right heart." And underneath, in smaller print, it read, "Swift tale, because every story deserves to be told." The narrator's voice begins to rise softly, carrying emotion and warmth as the final images roll: Sarah baking bread, Emma laughing in the sunlight, David handing over a donation check at a school, and a city glowing in the evening light. Narrator voice. From a single text to a life-changing friendship, Sarah's story reminds us that kindness knows no boundaries. It doesn't matter how small your gesture may seem, a word, a smile, a message. It could be the spark that reignites someone's hope. Because sometimes the help we give to others becomes the healing we needed ourselves. Soft music fades into the signature outro of your channel. Movie camera narrator host, you. And that, my friends, was today's story. A poor single mom texted a billionaire by mistake asking for baby formula money. What happened next? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Swift Tale, where every tale reminds us that compassion still exists in this world. Drop your thoughts below in the comments. What did this story mean to you? Do you believe that sometimes fate uses mistakes to bring people together? I'd love to read your opinions. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, one small act of kindness can rewrite someone's entire story.